All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Pilipinx-American Stories podcast. We here want to better understand the different aspects of the Filipinx-American diaspora. We cover topics such as, but are not limited to, history, community, and Filipinx-American culture. And I am your host, Alfredo, and we are here with episode 5 for season 2. And we are about halfway towards our goal for episodes, or for about like 10 episodes for this season. And this episode was pretty amazing. So, our guest for today is Averill AKA AudVision AKA AV, and he is an MC, an educator, and he's been a homie of mine for about 4 years now, going on 5 starting next year. And man, this was such a like this conversation. Like once you start hearing it and everything, you could tell it's just a straight up like homie vibe kind of catch up kind of thing. Like this was a long overdue kind of conversation that Averill and I like. I mean, like when you're listening to this conversation, it's just like this is naturally how Averill and I speak to each other. Like we don't really need like some kind of script when it comes to talking. Like everything, like we just bounce off these kinds of ideas, and it's just this kind of conversation was long overdue because I had a lot of questions about like his projects that just came out and just like life living as a transplant in the Bay Area from San Diego and everything. And it was just like a cultivation of just a whole bunch of different things that I personally didn't know until this conversation. And it was just like amazing. And everything really comes full circle with like the music that he's been putting out this year and just how life has been going for the past like few years or so. And it was just I would just like say it was a dope conversation overall. And like I said, like once you hear it, it's literally just a homie kind of catch up vibe. And I'm really hoping that y'all will get that kind of like natural conversation flow from it, because I personally like I love this conversation a lot. And yeah, again, with that being said, I present to you episode 5 for season 2. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're here for another dope episode for the podcast. We have another amazing guest. He is an MC, an organizer, and an educator. I've known him for about like 4 years now. We got Averill on this episode. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up, man?
Dude, it's so weird because like all the stuff we have like talked about, I don't think we've like. I mean, we've had like sit downs before, but like
Mhm.
not on this kind of like formal setting. We'll like spit like here and there about like certain things, but it's not like we'll sit down for like an hour or so just talking about like all this stuff. And it's kind of dope because like I know you've been like MCing for a while. Like you got me into like San Diego organizing again,
Oh,
and I'm just
dang.
like, oh, we never had like reflection time on this, so like this is tight.
I know it's kind of like it is very much like a reunion of sorts, even though I haven't been there in a while. It's really
Oh, dude,
dope.
100%, man. So like, I mean, just getting into it, like, I never really asked the story of everything, but like, you've been MCing, organizing, and doing educational work for a while. But how did you get started, like, with all of these?
Okay, so if I can, say it succinctly in a full story, I basically got started by being the only Filipino in my scholarship program at City College in San Diego. And that pretty much led me, so they're trying to find me resources to be more in tune to the Filipino community. So um one of the counselors actually knew Judy Pagdaxil, right? And she pretty much went to the first screening of, well, the only screening, but a screening of like this like 1 minute like film festival thing that I won based off of like a mental health based like film contest. So pretty much it was like promoting like the health center at City College, and then Judy was there as like a guest, and then she invited me to a Delano Manong's showing at Miramar College, and that's when I met John. And then that kind of just led into this like snowball effect of like meeting John from camp or the Kuya Ata mentorship program, and then being in that program for like 3-ish years or so. I really don't remember. And then that kind of led me right before, like literally, it was so funny. Like right before, or like a few months before, that's when I got contacted with or connected with you just through like friends of friends. I don't remember exactly where, but from that point, I just remember this like when we were talking about like when we would just chop it up. I remember the day when we met, and or not met, but like really sat and talked about like organizing and just being in a similar space of like with Amanda, who was the ED at the time with camp. And then that's when it kind of just became like I just seeing you in different facets with like or facets with like Unipro, and even like I mean, like correct me if I'm wrong, like even just like seeing you in the facet of like the night market and stuff. Like I just saw you just like blow up, and I was just like, oh dang, that's really dope. Like that's pretty much like where I started and where I met you, you know. um and then like emceeing kind of just became like the thing like that like worked along with it, where like whatever I was informed of, whether it's history or just like being in the community, all kind of came into the music that I was making. Like I started off like making music just like as an artist that like most people like just seeing it on YouTube, and then I'm like, oh, I can definitely do that. Like I was already interested, I just wanted to do something that was representative of who I was, but also like just how I was feeling at the time. So a lot of it was like heartbreak music, or like girl, like I'm trying to talk to this like girl type thing. And then it became reflective of like who I was at the time, where I wasn't really focusing on that, and I was just focusing on like what it meant for me to be in this community, kind of like taking influences from like as the obvious like Bamboo and like and Prometheus Brown from like Blue Scholars. Like those were the two that were kind of like my like Andres Bonifacio and and my Jose Rizal kind of like MCs of my life at the time, and then it just grew on from there.
Ooh, dude, actually, I think when I met you, I think that's when the start of just listening to more like Filipinx like artists from
Yeah.
California started like resurging, because like I've listened to Bamboo before, and I think the first time I even heard about Bamboo was through a
Mm.
camp workshop actually.
Oh,
So
sick.
it's kind of like, oh, it kind of came full circle. Like you reintroduced me to like this kind of like different West Coast Filipino hip hop and everything.
Mm,
But
hmm.
I think looking back, I do remember the first time like I actually saw you MC before, and it was actually, I think it was at a I think it might have been like at a Paka event or Paka East
Yeah,
Southwestern.
that was like my
Yeah, I
last performance in San Diego.
oh yeah, I think that was you were doing like I think it was a remix or a cover of like Lauryn Hill's like Doo
Hmm.
Wop. I'm
Oh
just like,
yeah.
oh yeah.
Oh man. Sorry. I always cringe to that because I'm just like, man, I really had the gall to be like up to par to Lauren Hill.
Yo, but dude, it was a tight track though, and like I think yeah, you were. I don't remember if you were the headliner or not, but I think it was either you or Sherwin that were like
Oh,
one of the
yeah.
last few, and I think I have that video somewhere. But like after that
Dude.
event was when like I started really connecting with you and everything, and then I think
Mhm.
like I started asking you more about camp, and I was like, yo, should I do this and everything, and then you explained it. Then
Mhm.
we ended up having that powwow with Amanda, and it's just like it's kind of history from there.
Yeah, I mean, oh man. That performance was like me kind of believing that like even if I were to be gone for such a long time, that I felt the comfort to be like this is like my like me leaving kind of thing. I still remember that day to the extent that I was like growing my hair out. I wore this like Bruno Mars hat. Like, and knowing like at the time I was really just like trying to like get my pen game strong, you know, but also realizing like um that there's a lot of things that um I still needed to work on with my like theory into practice kind of thing, where it's just like knowing I had a certain extent of understanding of what it meant to like work in the community, but it was still just like writing from like a very like new place. So oh man, that like that time was really interesting. And then like seeing like the transition for like just watching from afar up in the bay to like seeing what you and like all the organizations that you've been like part of has definitely like been influential into like knowing like what it meant to be in the space, you know, even though I wasn't there.
Yeah, dude, it's kind of just like it's kind of like you're reflecting a little bit from afar and everything, and it's just
Mhm.
also it's wild to think that was like even though like I just met you that year, that was also like your kind of like little last powwow before you left, because I think you left what a month or two before that. Like I remember you had your like birthday thing
Yeah, yeah.
over at like the beach or something, and like
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's when I started like meeting all the camp folk, and then like again history from there. It's just like a lot happened during like those 3 months or whatever, and I'm just like, yo.
Yeah, I mean, that's you I feel like it's so funny cuz again like it was very much like a flag football pass or whatever, like I would just be like there you go Alfredo, like I'm going but I'm still here for you, man. Like kind of thing.
Oh,
Because
yeah, dude. Honestly, I felt that for sure.
mhm. Like it's kind of wild just to think about it because of how much time has passed because like moving forward like again it was kind of one of those things like when I moved up here I felt like I wasn't just the only like Phil Am rapper up in the Bay, there was a lot more that had like their own kind of set standard, especially at SF State. Like it was kind of interesting to see what I what I wanted to be versus like what I was seeing too, because like most of the folks that I met were like already established in their own right in different ways. So I was kind of building from the ground up in a different area, and it was kind of wild to see where I thought I was, but gladly knowing like it was all for just like learning a craft in a different area was so different. It was nice too though, but yeah.
Dude, the amount of growth like I've seen you with like MCing and everything has been like super wild. I know you've been trying to do like a lot more. I don't know, more like I don't know what the word is, but like your stuff has gotten a lot more like intentional in that kind of sense. And like
Mm,
I don't know, dude, I see you like coming up like quite a lot. And I remember there was a I don't remember who posted it. I think it might have been you or Rocky G. And
mhm,
he posted something on Twitter that was like, "Yo, these are like the next gen or next like rookies or whatever coming up." And then
yeah.
like he was on there, you were on there, and like a whole bunch of other people were on there too.
Oh, dude, that's a trip because I feel like there's like the sense of comparison because like Rocky G's been definitely like he was one of the dudes. Like he was one of the dudes to see me when I moved up and he was just like, yeah, like I'm totally at a different level because he's just established himself more in the space. So that was really nice to see him. He posted that up and me being part of that list was really nice because I always feel like I'm still like consistently learning and that I'm not exactly at the same space, but I kind of like at this moment in time, especially since I've had the free time to think about it, I'm like, well, I'm a creator in the space and that's like there's no necessarily a level, there's just more experience. And I don't see that as like any good or bad. Like definitely like there's a lot more. Like when I saw him like collaborating with like Illa Manila and stuff, I was like, dang dude, like this is definitely like this is where I want to be, but I definitely need to be more happy about it than like try and seem like it's like a hit to me because everybody's at like their own experience and timing.
Oh, dude, 100%, man. You got to give yourself that kind of validity, especially with like artistry, because it's like if you're putting yourself to like a certain standard or whatever,
Mhm,
I mean, you have to like hold yourself to a higher standard. But if like it's too far away from like where you're at, it's like
mhm.
you're not really gonna give like your authentic self. And I feel like that's what you've been doing because like you've been giving a lot more authentic, like I don't know, just like whether it be like your beats or just like whatever you've been writing lately. It's like it's very you.
Definitely. And um as much as like it's been 4 years up here is like it still consistently comes from a space of like knowing that this isn't where I grew up, but this is where I'm growing. So I feel like that's what the perspective that I feel like I can bring similarly, but like not exactly like the same as like how I feel like my dad had to live in a different country and like move and stuff. Like if I were to go into that just like a little bit, it's like me moving away and having the general idea of what it meant to survive away from your family or like the comfort zone of like where you grew up and everything. So kind of going back into it is basically when I created home, that was kind of me understanding like what it meant from like at least the point of view of my dad, what it meant to be like in a place that you're trying to create as your home, right? So like flashback like 4 years ago, um, I started off in this area of Hayden Ashbury, which is like smack dab, if not almost smack dab into the middle of San Francisco. And I thought that was my new comfort zone or that was my new community, right? So for a month I had dealt with like a lot of stuff. Like it was like the first month I was like getting used to just living in San Francisco, living in the house that wasn't my house for like, that whole time and then just like learning how to use public transportation, because like San Diego, as much as it's there, is like I had a car most of the time, and I had to give like big ups to people that grew up in the city, because that's like their second hand, or like, seeing it like as natural as possible, right? And and then there's like a whole other things, like I had an uncle pass away and certain things like that. So like when I started off that project, it was literally starting off like the first place that I lived, and then all the places that I lived there before. So when it came down to just like my artistry at that point, like I was just like, I need to make something that tells a story, in which that like pretty much, and the idea of like what this is, like sampling different parts of my like my journey, in order for me to at least start off with something that I feel like is authentic, is like what you said. So like every single name of the project, or every single track of the project, every single name is like represents a place that I've lived, and there's all like it's like 7 tracks. So that's where I was like, damn, I really had like um the experience of a transplant in the Bay Area, because I say Bay Area because like most people say Bay Area or say San Francisco and think, oh, it's just San Francisco, or intertwine it with like Bay Area, but like the Bay is so big compared, that like I have to like make sure that I only lived in like San Francisco maybe for roughly like the first 6 months or less, and the rest have been like San Francisco adjacent, you know. So that's pretty much like how I kind of started off with like the experience of like, I know I wanted to have a whole project where I'm like rapping and like being able to produce my own stuff, but the time kind of like led it up to being like, this is um at first like the idea of soundtracking that journey first.
Oh, okay. This makes I never reached out to you about like what was the whole thing behind it and everything, but like hearing you explain just how like the Project Home was like working out and like seeing the titles and everything, I'm like, oh, this makes a lot more sense because I've known you mentioned it like
Hmm.
a few times, or like even just like slipping it in with conversations about like where you were staying at and everything, and it's just this project makes a lot more sense. And like going back to the whole authenticity thing, it is very much a storytelling project in itself.
Hmm. I mean, it's so I feel like I'm gonna give you some props too, dude, because I think when I saw your first book, I was like, wow, you're really doing it for people in the area that are like contributing to the community, right? And for me, I felt like that kind of storytelling definitely reflects of like the area that we grew up in, right? Um and I think like for me, that's where like living in a different city, most people will have more of the fantasy or like the romantic side of what that means, right? Living in San Francisco, most people are like, wow, you're in the Bay, right? Like it must be expensive. It must be really cool because it's like a really cool place. And I'm like, yeah, it is. But like by say the second or third track of that, or of like the second or third year of me living here, I was really much with the local community, right? I mean, just as of recent, like the first, like my real experience of San Francisco, if not the Bay Area, was working in the South of Market, which is one of the most dwindling but like still prominent like Filipino areas, which like was created in the idea now being called Soma Pilipinas, which was dubbed into being a cultural district. However, like there's like give or take like a handful of Filipino families and community members still there, other than the organizations that have been there for the last like, I'm gonna just say hella years because I don't remember exactly. I want to say 50, but more or less. So yeah, it really like when I was making home, I had to like see it from a transplant's point of view. I'm not gonna rep the Bay in the same way that people from the Bay are, because that would be disrespectful. Like even in the sense of my sound, I feel like I've tried to still stick to what I liked versus like even knowing, because like there's like that influence, right? Like I try and listen to some like San Diego cats, and I'm like, I don't even sound like that, right? I feel like for the most part, I'm just trying to see what my authentic self and voice as an artist is. And for the most part has always been just trying to like enjoy what I'm making and say the truth in what I'm like writing. and performing, and for the most part, like tell a story, because I feel like for the most part, like I don't want to just kind of go into the machismo of hip hop and all, where it's like, oh, I'm really good at rapping and this is what I can do. And not saying that that's a bad thing, but I know I can do that. And sometimes I do because that's the enjoyable part. But like, at least for my projects, no matter where I'm at, like audience wise or whatever, because that's like a whole nother thing as an artist. That for me, I was just like, my first project has to be something that I can look back at and be like, wow, this is something that I made and something for my family or for me, which, kind of shows in the samples. Like I use like my mom, my niece in the beginning, and then like there's like little sprinkles of like me in an interview with like a teacher, and then also some advice that I've gotten from like my dad in an interview I had to do for like an ethnic studies course. So it's all kind of like worked out together in its own way.
Oh, dude, honestly, that's really dope because I mean, just looking back at it, I mean, you just, I mean, I know you posted this like what earlier this year, but it's like
Mhm, mhm,
if you're looking back at it from, I don't know, maybe like a year from now, maybe like 2 years or 5 years,
mhm,
it's like it is like a reflectory kind of like tool
mhm,
because like you get to see what it's like being that transplant. You get to see what it's like transitioning from San Diego to like the Bay Area or like whatever area in the Bay that you're in, and it's just like I don't know. It's like going to the whole like influences thing that you're talking about. Yeah, like even though you are living in the Bay, but that doesn't necessarily make someone like a Bay Area like I don't know like they bit like someone that's like lived there for like their whole life or everything. So I think just I don't know addressing the whole transplant thing. And it's like I really like this whole storytelling it, especially now that you're elaborating like way more on this project because I remember you said that this was going to be like a completely different project, but like
mhm.
now it's like this thing that's just oh it's this is literally like what your journey of home looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it's so wild because I think about it. So I did like the artisty thing, and I was like, I'm turning this in on my 25th birthday because I need something to show like going into 25th birthday. and and then when I released it, I was like, at first I was kind of skeptical because like I can pinpoint like things that I could have done better, but I just at that point it's like one of those things. It's like if you're holding, all this like great art that if you don't like if you're not able to just like put it out there, then sometimes it's just gonna be there and sitting. And I was telling myself like this is the year, no matter what, like I need to do it. Because it was a lot of like in a way like healing, right? So kind of showing into like my new work too, it's like I wanted it to be something that was like in the idea of being therapeutic, but knowing that it's not the only thing. Like I try like a lot of the things that I'm talking about, or at least like representing in the music of home, really show like how it felt like living in these different points of my life. Um like I can go through like the whole list and just be like, oh, this reminds me of that, or like if you don't mind, I can like give an example.
Oh
So
no, dude, go ahead. Absolutely, I want to hear more of this.
so like as an example, right? Like if I were to go through the whole story, it's pretty much starts in like every place that I've lived. And I'm like gonna like reference it because just in case I miss like if I miss a song, then that would be hella bad. But so I already kind of explained love and hate, first time living in the Bay Area or in San Francisco specifically, and just kind of like loving the place, but also knowing like, and the idea of hate, which is literally spelled as the street and everything. It was like hate being in the idea that I don't like being away from my family. I mean, when I had my uncle pass away in that time, I already had to like go back after being there for a month and just kind of like unpacking like, wow, this is really long. Like I didn't have my car at that time, so I actually like took a train, so I felt in that first instance how far it was. And then I moved away from Haight Ashbury, and then I moved into this area called Ingleside, which is like roughly um in the same area as San Francisco State, but it's like the most compacted. Like you think like when neighborhoods are like super like packed up in San Diego, which is not really that packed up. Like this is like the condensed version, dude. Like houses connecting together. I was in this time on Ingleside. I lived in this 9-person home where it was like pretty much a person per room, and then but it was like it was zoned out to be so bad that there was only one exit out of the house, so it was already kind of breaking like fire laws and stuff. um so I and it's called no Ingleside parking, just based off the fact that when I did bring up my car, I was just like, oh, I couldn't even technically live in this area because I would be coming home at like 3 in the morning or something, because I just didn't like living or staying in that space like all the time. So I would always be out, kind of just like unpacking. Oh, I'm away from home. So I met people to be home with, that I actually wouldn't sleep in the area or in the house that I was like renting out to. So a certain extent, I started like parking my car and sleeping in it at this time. And it was kind of one of those things where I was just like, all right, like this is just my journey in living in San Francisco, because it was just like at the point where if I parked too far and I tried walking all the way, it would be too dangerous and just like all this other stuff. And at certain points I would even just like I would like bunk up with like homies and just like stay at their place, even though I was still paying like 740 for rent or whatever. So like stories like that, like that's pretty much just like going forward. Like I started living in Daly City, which is like the national city of San Francisco, because that's actually a big population of Filipino neighborhoods. Like you can pinpoint like the malls being like one to one to being like, oh, that's Plaza Bonita, or like there's like local spots that you can go to for food and all that, and it's just like it's very much felt like home. And then like kind of going down just like the track list, even like City of Souls, which is actually not like, it doesn't, this is the only one that doesn't, or one of the only ones that doesn't have like um a direct name, but City of Souls is actually the name of Colma, because it actually is a part of a part of like Daly City, San Francisco, adjacent, whatever, that actually has more dead people than alive, because all of the um pretty much the graveyards or whatever in San Francisco actually got moved to Colma. And so that there's like these like weird horror stories where San Francisco has like people finding like dead bodies in their house because they didn't even realize like they were like living on top of like old graveyards and stuff. Anyway, but that one's like kind of a pivotal moment of the story, because that's when I actually dealt with displacement in San Francisco or Bay Area. And it was kind of like the worst experience out of all of them, just knowing like I had to deal with like, one, we're getting kicked out after only living in a place for a month, and just being displaced for a while. And yeah, kind of transitioning to where I lived the last couple times was where Leanne, my partner, we lived with her family for a few months in Hayward, which was across the Bay Area in the East Bay. And then we lived in East Oakland, like deep East Oakland, meaning like we're in a definitely in a different like socioeconomic status of like where we are now in Oakland. And it was very much reflective. If I were to give like a neighborhood like similar, it would be like Lemon Grove, or even like going toward like Encanto area. And it was just like a lot of different stuff, and then full circle leading to where I'm living currently now. And it was just kind of like seeing like this whole process being like, oh, okay, so I'm living what most transplants, if not most Bay Area folks, live, in the idea that like housing is never secure, and also like trying to find that as home in any kind of regard of like comfort, or even just like knowing of stability. Like even now, like kind of thinking about like having to move. Like I've only lived here relatively a year and a half, and I'm still moving, but different circumstances. But it definitely was like kind of like playing with the idea like, what is home, and how do we make home, even though when the place of in which you live is not stable. So that's like pretty much the whole breakdown of home.
Ooh, I'm really happy you elaborated on like every single track, because it's like, I mean, you've mentioned it before, man. Like even just in like other conversations beside this, but like the whole romanticizing of like the Bay Area. I mean, like yeah, it's fun and everything, but like for some people, like I mean, with this whole situation, or just like
Mhm,
talking about the whole stability thing, I mean, that's the reality for people up there. Like
mhm.
it's been getting like a lot more expensive, and I think like did they start like doing like tolls on the Bay Bridge again?
Oh, they never stopped, for if anything, man. Like, it's like that's like the other thing too. Like once you leave San Francisco, you're pretty much screwed money wise, because a good chunk of your, like, other than gas, like a good chunk of your money goes toward just the toll itself. Like at a certain point, like it was like kind of I was unaware because I would be using like a fast pass, but before it would be like $5 one way, and then going back, like going out of San Francisco, you wouldn't necessarily need to pay. So it would be like, give or take, if I'm there like, 6 days out of the week, that's like $30, and sometimes it fluctuates depending on when you leave the East Bay to go to San Francisco. So it would like go from like 350 to like $5 or whatever. Don't like, quote me on like the amount, but it was generally just that much. So most of my month, or a good chunk of it, would just be going toward that, if not going toward like my gas.
Dang, dude. Okay, so I'm looking at it right now. So apparently it's like $7 right now to get
Oof.
over
Yeah.
to like, and if you're doing that like every day, like, dude, that's a
Yeah.
lot of money just like trying to travel back and forth.
Dude, it was trippy knowing, like, if it wasn't that, I'd be kind of in a decent space with money. And like even being in like our house for the last 6 months have definitely shown me how much I spent toward just doing that, because I wouldn't be in San Francisco for one thing. If I did that, then it would be just like, it wouldn't even be worth it, you know? Um but even just on top of that, since I'm driving, like if I were to even give the add up of like how much I had to pay for parking alone, like I would easily, even if I didn't have to spend on food or even had to spend on like just like a luxury purchase or whatever, I really had paid like what, almost $40 a day based off of like what I was paying for like gas and parking, and then also give or take like the what's it called, the Bay Area toll. So that's why I was just kind of like it was consistently just being like, yep, I'm just throwing most of my money to that. And that's why it was like very much a survival thing, being out there. Like it was nice that I was working at the time, or at least my most recent like coffee job. So like tips would mostly cover the idea of like what I'm spending for my daily, and then like I would use my usual like paycheck to like pay for like, the regular things, rent and all that. So yeah, man.
But dude, it's so wild to think that because like you were also, I mean, like the whole time you were living up there, I mean, you were doing stuff like with school, so like that's already
Mhm.
hard enough as it is.
I mean, yeah, like I feel like I didn't even mention it, but like most of what I had to do, I at least had to be in the city or San Francisco for two things, right? It would be work if I had to work that day, teaching with PEP, and then having to do another thing with like where my partner has to go to work, or what's it called, or any other thing, right, like an event or something. So like if I had to make sure that it was worth it, to the extent that, oh, I at least like made my worth of like the $7 or the $20 of parking or whatever. And sometimes that would happen twice. Like I would have to pay for parking, but it only lasts till 6 o'clock, and then I have to go to a different place, and then I'd do like an hourly parking or whatever. Like it's very much like, again, like when people say like, "Oh, I'd love to go to San Francisco, but I got to save up because it's expensive." I'm like, try living it. Like 4 years, dude, like it like I don't try and um like I try not to think negatively of people that are like coming up here to like experience the Bay Area, which is like amazing, cuz the way that it looks amazing to come, but like it's like San Diego too, right? Like it's a very much a tourist town, like as a sense of revenue, right? And then but most of the people that you see that are working don't see it that way, because the people that are in those like tourist attractions and stuff, they're just like trying to get their buck. But they have to like work within either like the tech industry or uh they have to work within like the tourist industry, just so they can be able to afford in the place that they live, that you are visiting, what I'm saying? So for me, I had to see that like firsthand.
But dude, it sounds like it might have been like worth it because I mean, you've been doing stuff. Well, I mean, and just to mention it off, since you mentioned Pep, like I'm pretty sure that was like one of the main factors that kept you like going back and forth, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like, so reflecting on like just like the experience itself was great, you know, and it still is. I think like it's just a matter of knowing like from other people's perspectives, really like again like even reflective of the project. Like I really have to see it as I am a visitor in this space and I have to be able to know that not necessarily that I'm not welcome, but I always have to know that I had the idea and privilege to be in this space and work with the people that I've been able to work with. Like, cause that's like the thing that doesn't like necessarily make me feel as bad because, you know, going and living in a different area, you have to know and recognize like if you're not contributing to it, you're contributing to it in a different way. Not necessarily like actively being like, oh, I'm a gentrifier. I'm trying to be here because like it's an amazing place to live in or whatever. But like but recognizing like for me, I knew that I wasn't here to do like the usual things. Like I felt like I haven't even really did any like the idea of like what most people visit here for, you know. I haven't seen like Lombard or whatever. I've been to Chinatown, but like that was more of like I knew people that might have had an event there or I've had to be there for events or even the South of Market. Like South of Market isn't necessarily like a touristy attraction place. They have like certain places, but it's like historical, right? Like like our Ate Lily having like archipelago books, right? Or being able to go to like Bindlestiff, which is like one of the only Filipino American like black box theaters, you know. um Very much like a lively scene of like artists in that area, not necessarily the most pretty, and you know, not a shot to that, but like it's just a reality. Like there's a lot of homelessness, there's a lot of like drug usage out there, and then there's like just families trying to make it there, you know. So I really didn't see much of it. Like I've done like some things, but like it's really just like I've only been here for the community and being able to just like see and experience it from the eyes of people that have lived there all their lives, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, like I forgot where I was gonna go with this, but it's like it's the reality that a lot of people don't really see as often. Like, I mean, just going back to the whole touristy thing. I mean, like, yeah, it'll those kind of like realities will like shine here and there, but
Mhm.
then like if you're not living there or just like haven't been there for a while, like you don't really get to see like all that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and I always have to think of it on the other end of that is like, yeah, they won't see it because it might not be as readily available information, you know. Like being able to like I was able to work with like the Filipino veterans, the veteranos of San Francisco, where they're known for being like the Filipino World War II veterans, right? That didn't necessarily get all the benefits that they got for their service, right? And even with that, it's like being able to see like the conditions and just like the day to day for them versus like, oh, I'm gonna go to um I don't know, Lombard Street. I think I already said that or whatever. I don't even know the name. Um but you know, it's like again, it's like readily available information, right? Like I wouldn't know unless it kind of worked out for me that I was actively seeking for those things, not necessarily like I was actively seeking for uh like tourist stuff, which is nothing wrong, but I'm just saying like my experience is totally different.
Mm. But I mean, did a lot of that come from like when you were just working with Pep and just doing community stuff?
Well, you know what's funny is like it came hand in hand of just like me trying to find a community that I was like wanting for support or even just to not network in the idea that I'm just like, oh, I'm trying to find like an experience or anything, but necessarily like when you're away from home, you're really trying to find that community that can hold you down away from like who you knew back home, right? So when I was working in the South of Market, and it just so happened that both me and my partner were like working in the South of Market, we like were able to create this like camaraderie with everybody that we're there for the same reasons, if not similar reasons, just being able to like go to a show or try to like support people on their actions or something like that, you know? And so for me, even like with Pep, right? Like um where we were teaching, like I taught at like three different schools with Pep. If not, like, you know, for the reference of the listeners, Pep is Pinoy Pinay Educational Partnerships. So within like pretty much 20 years worth of service to four different schools, right? Like I pretty much was able to within the 3 years or four now of being in Pep, I was able to be at least at all of them except the elementary school. And it was interesting to be able to be in those spaces because it also gives me another sense of like like of people that are growing up, or students that are growing up in a city that is changing like almost every year, if not almost every month, kind of thing. And with that experience, like I also had like myself get checked a little that I can't teach them in the same way that I would like try to connect with folks that are also from like Southeast Dago, you know? Like I had to realize like I had to understand them first before even really trying to put myself in this position that I know who they are already, because it's very similar. But yeah.
It's kind of wild to hear that because it's like I'm seeing this amount of growth that you've experienced since you've been in the Bay and everything. Because it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's there is like some differences, some similarities, but there are a whole bunch of differences between like San Diego and like the Bay Area and everything. And it's just like you having to readjust yourself and just adapting to that is like, I mean, if that isn't growth, then I don't know what is. Because like you can't really just like go in there and like for better word like use of the word like I don't know if gentrifying is the right word for this. I might be like going overboard a little bit, but it's like you're not pushing like I mean, yes, you have like your own educational knowledge and background coming from where you came from and everything, but it's like you kind of have to like sit down a little bit just to understand where everyone else is coming from and seeing how they're I don't know, seeing how they're affected by just like everything that's going on.
I mean, you know, like, so that's the thing, right? Like, I, even when I was moving up here, I realized that in some way I'm taking space that could be taken or given to someone that is struggling up here, right? If
Mm,
anything, most of the time, like any time that I've had to move has always been through in the idea of who may or may not be community, right? And I say that because like one of the experiences when I got evicted, but it was like a whole, you know, debacle. It wasn't really an eviction, but it was just like this the fear of that idea, right? That they all came from people that I knew in the community, if not like some kind of like friend of a friend kind of thing. So I never really sought out to being like, oh well, I'm going to live in this area because it's like really dope, and I can definitely like see myself living here, because I feel like that's like the general idea of like what gentrification is. Like I want to live here for all the like romantic things that are here. You know, San Francisco Bay Area is like a mecca for like liberal leftist thought, you know, in the general idea, right? Or for people also on the tech side, like it's just like a dope place that if you can afford it, you can like live anywhere, you know? And but the disparity, it's like it's very much apparent. And for me, like I had to see myself like growing, like I don't see myself in the idea of the like black and white of like, oh, gentrifier, you know, I'm contributing to the community and seeing it for the reality and not for, you know, the things, you know, like am I going to go to a place that has like the good food and all that, but like I'll always go local before it being like some like big chain or something, you know? Like I
mm.
got to see like Filipino businesses kind of build up and like even like unfortunately like go down because of like the situation that we're in right now, but also knowing like I have some kind of tie to knowing like, oh, I didn't just go to like I don't want to like shout out any like places that I might be sounding like anything bad, but like I didn't just go to that kitschy thing, that I got to see like these different levels of like, at least an idea of Filipino business, if not like people of color that are like thriving or trying to in a city, you know. Um but yeah, like I had to really see it from a point of view like I'm here with the idea that I'm trying to move forward in in a community that I wasn't there for the beginning, but I have to respect and understand, you know. I feel like it's really just putting in that effort and knowing like what you're really contributing to, versus like just seeing it as it is, you know. Uh I don't know if that made sense, but
No,
yeah.
that makes 100% sense, and it seems like, or I mean, it doesn't seem like it does. It does reflect a lot more in home and everything because that's basically like the story that you're telling with that. Because
Right.
there's a whole bunch of factors and layers that just go into I mean, the struggle and just seeing like what everyone else is going through, what you've gone through, and everything. It's like, again, like people do. There is a luxury in the sense that, oh yeah, I could just live out here because like I make enough money and everything. But that's not the reality for a lot of people up there, and it's reflecting a lot in. I mean, with this project specifically, with Project Home and everything, it's like, yo, this is the actual reality for people that are not in like these big time like tech industry or whatever, or like people that
Mhm.
have been I don't know passed down money or whatever.
Yeah, no doubt.
But I am curious, just like taking a quick little break on just like, I mean, we kind of like went off topic on stuff, but this is like been good conversation. But like, just kind of trailing back to like your journey as like an MC and everything. Like,
Mm.
I mean, is there any kind of like dream project you want to pursue, or like some kind of project that like you're currently working on? I mean, like you've had Home that came out like earlier this year, and then you recently had Mine that came out like recently too. Like, is there like any next big steps for you in terms of just like producing or like MCing or whatever?
Yeah, honestly, when I saw this question, I was just like, man, like I have like so many ideas that I want to pursue, at least in my artistic career, that I don't want to let go of. Like, okay, so one is like I because so if I were to break down even just like my artist name, right? Like I started off with my name first being AV Lee, and then someone told me it sounded like a porn star name, and I was like, oh, bro, like I was like, nope. But also I had context of why I changed it. So I went by the moniker changing it to AudVision, and then I also just like reference it to being AV because I feel like in the artist world it seems the most like understandable, like, so it's like still my name but it's not, and I also use that just like for a nickname for people to just know my name easier. That I wanted to do movies, and I think that's just because my first, if anything, my first like art that I was very much invested in was movie making, and then music has always been consistently on the side, knowing that I just wanted to learn how to do it because I felt like I could. Um and I was just like always wanted to do something like that. So I always try to see if I can do that. Like even in Home, like I was trying to do like soundscaping, like at least in one of them where the second Ingleside parking was like I used a sound from the BART, which is like the transportation system in San Francisco, and that to kind of show that like that was kind of like my first like experience living in San Francisco, getting used to all the sounds and just like the cityscapes and stuff. So it was kind of like if I were to have a dream project, it would be like wanting to make a movie or a short film, if anything, of specifically San Diego. But I also feel like I need to recontextualize it toward toward like how I could, knowing that I've been so far away, which might be the story, who knows? Because it really very much got influenced by David Diggs and Rafael Casal's Blind Spotting. And because that's so much a love letter to Oakland, that I want to do the same for me in Paradise Hills or me in Nashville City, whatever. I feel like Paradise Hills specific, but just because of the fact that like it came in tune with one, they both were actors in it, but also seeing them doing like two coinciding like soundtracks for it, that it very much shows how much they invested in the community that they had to break away from too as artists, and if anything, that's my dream project, just making a movie.
You know, it's kind of like, did you hear about that concept while you were up there, or was this something that was like way before like you even move up to the Bay Area?
What's funny is like I think I saw a film that was about Paradise Hills and it was like a Filipino family or something, but I never saw, like I feel like if I searched it up I wouldn't be able to find it unless you have links, then I would totally be down. But it was something that was just like when I was up here, it was very much like when I saw Blind Spotting, I was like, wow, this is how you can have social commentary but also just be able to have like a lighthearted ish film that was just like talking about the day live or the day-to-day lives of you know Bay Area Oakland folks, which was amazing to me.
You know, it's wild to actually hear this because I remember one of the things I don't remember when it was, but I think it might have either been like one of the times you visited back to San Diego or before, or like sometime like after or before you left to the
Hmm.
Bay Area and everything, was like there was something about like taking or like learning some stuff over in the Bay Area and then taking it back home and just seeing where that goes from there.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, if I were to say like the OGs of our community definitely want people to come back after being up here in the Bay Area, man. I mean, I mean, I didn't plan it out that way, right? But part of me wanted to bring it back there because realistically, it's amazing that I'm able to do the work here um for folks that I'm invested to helping, because that's just how I feel like should be done if you're living in a different area that isn't your like necessarily your own, right? But for me it was like, at some point I need to be back home to bring back all the things that I learned, whether it being like teaching with pep or working in a nonprofit in the south of market. Like I definitely had like a very transformative experience, and not saying that I know everything, but I know that I can contribute more to with the tools that I am able to, or that I was able to gain from being here. So that was always in general the plan, not necessarily during a global pandemic, but but like having the time to be there and be able to come back and to to just like kind of represent and like kind of find my footing back in the place that kind of like um encouraged me to leave but also know when to come back.
It's kind of like, I mean, this goes into a whole nother layer of like that last track. I mean, this is really like that full circle kind of thing.
I think about that all the time, dude. It's kind of a trip just because it's like full circles. It was very much like I didn't want it to be like, oh, this is just like another this is just another area that I moved into. But it was very much so like me learning what it meant to have a bookend, right, to my journey up in the Bay Area. I know at certain points I was telling myself like I think I'm gonna just stay up here because it's really dope and like it feels more comfortable than like realistically how it was for like being in San Diego. But um I also realized that like that comfort also comes with knowing like it's not as developed in the same way that I know San Francisco to San Diego, but that's also something that I shouldn't be necessarily afraid of. It's just knowing like San Diego's way much more like the conservative like town or very capitalistic, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with it, but there's a lot more to work for in a sense of just like trying to break away or have the conversations, even like I mean we don't have to go super in depth with it, but like I'm sure you can see like there's intergenerational differences between like philams in San Diego, whether it's like North County, South County, or even just like affiliations with different parts of like San Diego. Um, so that's always been something that has impeded me from like, or like had reservations for me to like not go back. But also I think now at this point I feel like I can kind of navigate better with the experiences that I've had here, knowing like that I know my stuff.
Oh yeah, no, most definitely. But like that whole thing of like intergenerational, that in itself could be like its own conversation. But I'm like happy to hear
Yeah.
that because like I don't know, this is like I keep going back to like these conversations we had like before like you left and everything, and I feel like everything that's been going on with you in the Bay Area and just like how you've grown, like and just how your music has been like as of late too. It's like I could see like how much has like happened, even though I
Mhm.
haven't like I'm not always asking about like what's going on. It's just like you're actually putting it out there that like you are changing. You're definitely growing. You're like taking these experiences and then you're like turning it into something like I don't know, something else that's just like okay, how can you reframe this and just how could you utilize like what you're learning and just like I don't know, dude, it's like it it's like this whole reunion thing that you were just like saying at the beginning. It's like yo, we're talking about this right now, and like our mindsets are totally different, or not. I wouldn't say totally different from like 4 years ago, but it's definitely grown a lot.
Mhm. Mhm. I think that's like the thing too, like generationally, like I feel like we have a better chance at the generation before us, if we want to say just like Gen X, like or whatever, to us being like millennial Zers or whatever. And that they have more of an open ear compared to like the generation before them where they would just get shot down easily or just be like, oh, you're being stubborn, you need to listen to me and respect me. Like not necessarily that's a bad thing, but there's just like it just stops the conversation. But I have more faith in like people, whether it's like philam community or just like like the POC general community of San Diego, are willing to have those conversations, but we also like have like a mutual respect compared to like the one before us, you know.
Mm. Honestly, that's super big because it's like, how are we gonna overcome that if like I don't know if that cycle keeps on going. Like I have this conversation a lot with people,
Hmm.
and if that like that cycle of just like stopping someone like right there, it's kind of just like yo, nothing's gonna be done.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Oh man, but that's just like, oh, there's so much I could go into that honestly. Like, but I'm happy that like your journey up to the Bay from like San Diego has, I don't know, brought you these kinds of lessons to like take back to like to San Diego or wherever like you're gonna be going because it's like, yo, it's showing a lot.
You know, honestly, too, like if I were to even think about it in a sense of music too, is like I don't know what it'd be like for my music to be received if not in San Diego. Because I feel yeah, I could play like if I were to go to a hip hop like event, I mean maybe not right now, right? But uh like if I felt like at a certain point that it's more digestible or understood in what I rap in my music to the Bay Area compared to San Diego, because I always felt like it wasn't everyone's cup of tea, but I feel like I also like that would stop me from trying to, you know, be okay in my hometown. Like I'm not a gangster rapper. I'm not necessarily um like I don't see myself as like being like a backpack or like conscious rapper, and the idea that I'm like trying to put you on game of all these theories or talking about like specific like political ideologies and stuff. I'm just seeing it as like as an individual, as a Filipinx-American, as like someone that has lived in different areas and know like to the general public, and honestly to like where when I talk to my dad about my music, to something that's digestible for him to recognize what I'm trying to say. Like when I finally released Mind, you know, it was kind of like one of those things like, yeah, I have political opinions embedded in it, but like it's not as direct, which, you know, some people will be like, well, what are you trying to say? But for me, like as an artist, I feel like I've been able to at least show it in a way of a very individual, but like hopefully relatable approach. You know what I'm saying? So that's why for me, I have like this reservation, like, okay, I'm gonna be doing music in San Diego, and it's different from when I was doing it before. And I'm just trying to see is like, well, this is just who I am. You can take it or leave it. I know I need to at least come in with the bars, or people are gonna be like, this is whack, you know. But um I definitely have a reservation, but it's still there. Like I'm not gonna like let it bring me down, because at a certain point, that's like part of the reason why I thought I would never be able to do it in San Diego. But you know,
That's really big too because it's like, I mean, the only thing you really can be is yourself when it comes to like your music and everything. Like, it sucks to say this, but like I see a lot of people like here in San Diego that are like trying the MC game or whatever. I mean, there are some like dope cats out here, but then there's a lot of people just like, oh, let's just spit bars or whatever, or just like let's make this like nice party beat or whatever. I mean, that's cool and everything, but it's just like if that's not your cup of tea, then it's like it's not your cup of tea. If you just want to write or just like spit whatever like you're feeling or whatever, that's totally
mhm.
fine. Like you need to just be yourself when it comes to that. I mean, like I guess people won't understand it like at to some degree, but then maybe that's not like what they should be touching at that moment. Maybe they should take some time to just like sit down or whatever and just try to figure out what they need and everything. But I'd rather you just like figure out like your journey, what you need. Like it doesn't even have to be like so direct. Like if it resonates with someone, then it resonates. Like you're doing your job like
Right?
as an MC, and you're doing your job to yourself as an artist, and like that's the only way you really can be authentic with yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like I definitely had um mentioned when I said it in heart check that I'm like done with machismo, you know, because like I get it, like, you know, part of like a hip hop culture has been embedded in the idea that you need to be this like I don't know how to explain it. That you have to be this kind of like alpha whatever, you know? Trying to be like, I'm here with the bars, and like that's what's it. Because like I feel like most things from San Diego is like gangster rap or like stuff like that, you know? I mean, and I'm not necessarily trying to do that, and I'm not necessarily trying to be in an R&B tip either, you know. But like I'm just trying to carve out my own like space that like no matter what it is, this is San Diego rap, whether you say it or not. It's just like not what is necessarily because I'm from there. Like I can't really say that it's not necessarily San Diego rap. It's just like not the what you're expecting, and I think that's where I'm trying to be at least as an artist now, where I'm just seeing it like, well, it is what it is. Like you can like it or not, but I think it's good. I know I don't have whack bars, you know, but I don't know.
No, that's straight up though, because it's like, I mean, with your recent project Mind, that's kind of just like reclaiming that aspect of yourself. Like, yo, I'm dope. I like what I do. Like, I'm gonna keep doing it. If people don't like it, then like, yo, dude, just whatever. This is not like your cup of tea, but I know what I'm saying and I know what I'm like feeling and everything, and it's valid at the end of the day.
Yeah, like I don't. I feel like even in my own experience, like kind of bringing it back to like Bamboo or Prometheus Brown, right? Like they are who I wanted to be at the time when I started really getting serious about writing about my experiences. But they're not everything that I want in the music I want to listen to. And then I think I'm trying to find my way in similar ways to have the same kind of like impact of my voice, but not necessarily copy what they're doing, you know? Because it isn't necessarily like I can kind of get like where everybody is, even like when bringing in like Ruby, you know, like the reason why I like Ruby so much is being able to like she's not necessarily in those like those two, I guess, like at first like those two lanes, right? Conscious and like gangster conscious rap, you know, whatever. um but I also feel like my duty as an artist is not to be stereotypically like a hard rapper or whatever, because that's not necessarily who I am, and I'm never going to play myself as that, you know. And I actually thought I had to for like a little bit, just because I thought it would be um that's the pocket that I'm in, you know. But I also don't want to like enforce, if not like feel like I need to be that person just because I am this like big Filipino dude or whatever, you know. But it is what it is.
Yeah, dude, honestly, I think that's the going back to that whole machismo thing. It's like y- it's kind of just like survival of the fittest in
Hmm.
terms of like MCing and everything, because people also see it as like a kind of, I don't know, some kind of like a game as well, like in the sense that, oh, you kind of have to be like on top of everyone else, like you kind of have to dominate a little bit, but like that doesn't, I mean, yeah, sure, the competition is nice, but it's like, dude, there's no need to like compete to that level or whatever. It's like, yo, just be yourself, be that like kind of authentic person. Like, you don't have to rap like everyone else. I mean,
Hmm.
that goes onto the whole like individualistic side of like hip hop and everything. Like, the whole like reason behind it is like, yo, you kind of just want to, like, at least now anyway, it's like, yo, you're just trying to be yourself, because it's like, if you're trying to be like someone else, I mean, that's basically biting at that point.
Hmm. And also I need to make it like a point too, because sometimes I feel like I try and fit myself into a mold that's consumable to people, but also it's just like me understanding it for myself too, is that I am non-binary. So like I have to make sure that even for myself, I caught myself earlier saying Filipino instead of Filipinx, but like that's also another debate that we don't need to get into in this podcast. But that I I have to see myself as this artist too, regardless of the fact that if it's like consumable to people or not, because that is who I am and how I identify. Will I have that conversation with every single person? Probably not if they're not like willing to have the conversation. But like that's also another thing. Like most like mask presenting like artists won't necessarily talk about their gender or try to. Like it there's like some like little shout outs to it in mind for myself, and like why I also talk about machismo, but like it's just like one of those things like where I have to make sure that I clearly and succinctly am able to represent that, because that is who I am, even though I might not say it, you know, all the time.
Oh, dude, that's another embodiment. That's another like level of authenticity right there. Because it's like,
Exactly.
again, you have, if you're gonna be yourself as much as possible, then whether it be subtle or very like direct, like there is like that point of addressing like, oh, this is who I am at the end of
Mm,
the day.
yeah,
Take it or leave it.
exactly.
Oh man, okay. So since we're actually at that point for the advice section, I mean, since we are talking about like whole authenticity or something, like what does it look like for someone to be like their most authentic self when it comes to like their own form of artistry? Like what is your take on that?
I mean, as simple as just being like, I feel like I've wrote it so many times for myself and for others to be like, write what you do in real life. Because realistically, like, there's times where I've met like artists that will be like, I'm here for the people, but there's only certain people, kind of going into the gender bit or going into like there's like the conscious writer that will talk about community and use that community as a stepping stone to like showing what kind of artist they want to be, but necessarily you find some dirt, not like I'm like actively looking, but you just hear it in the community and then find out that they're just as crappy as any other person, not necessarily not dehumanizing that person, but however recognizing like, okay, if you're writing all this stuff, you have to realize that being authentic for yourself is being able to at least recognize that there's some stuff you need to work on. Like,
Mm,
if anything, like for mind specifically, I was writing that from a place where, I mean, most of it is coming from like writing in quarantine, and for the most part is like being self-reflective. Like, to go into like genius breakdown stuff, in the first verse of Heart Check, I'm talking about my relationship with like whether it's like masculinity or, the male gender being reflective of how I act in that way based off of how I've seen it modeled by my dad. Whether it's like, and it's not in this in depth, but just like to give a perspective is like whether it's like how I understand and unpack my emotions, how I understand how to specifically channel my anger or power in my voice, and also understanding like what that means for what I want to do and change is really in the idea. If I were to make it like pinpoint it to a theory, is like basically being able to try to break like generational boundaries that or traumas that I've been able to kind of understand through interviews of my dad and recognizing like, a lot of things is like for him and I like reflectively is just trying to see it like him and I are both in this like space, like him being like in his like almost in his 60s and I'm like in my mid 20s of understanding like what does it mean to leave like a legacy or to leave like a mark on the world after like the things that we've gone through, And my dad's still figuring this out to this day because he's still like trying to shuffle and I'm trying to do the same in my own way, like where it's like my professional and my personal like legacy or my like just my life, right? So when it comes down to being authentic, I feel like for most folks, like I just would like that whatever you write down, whatever you say and pretty much perform, like at the end of the day that you're not just saying that for people to hear because of the buzzword, right? For inclusivity or just because of like it's like the hot thing, but you believe in what you say and you do what you say. And I always feel like I need to do that for myself. And sometimes I'm like writing myself or writing my bars to write to myself to remind myself like, oh, I'm not gonna be that person to write like these activist bars. Like I'm gonna be like, oh, I'm here for the people and I'm here for the women or whatever. But like at the end of the day, if it's behind like things for the women or whatever, like is it really genuine? May or may not be. But like at the end of the day, like now for me, and I'm literally speaking about myself back in the day, that that for me it has to come from like self-reflection and understanding because at the end of the day like people will look at that music and if they knew you as a person and if they knew you as the artist too, then it'll be reflective of like what you're actually doing.
that's something that I don't see a lot of people actually talking about, and I'm really happy that you mentioned it because it's like, oh, you could spit a battle rap, or you could call someone out on a track or something, but are you really calling yourself in too? Like,
Mm-hmm.
music in itself is like self reflection and just you're essentially storytelling in that kind of way. Like, music is a storytelling platform, and it's like if you're not like sure you could talk about like the surface level of stuff, but it's just like are you really like digging deep into that authentic self if you're not checking yourself once in a while?
Yeah, for sure. Because like what's kind of wild, man, is like being a fan of beat rock and and then being up here in the Bay where most of the artists are, it's kind of wild how close you are just to see like the growth of these like artists, and just even like on like at least a name to name basis that you're that close, you know? Because I mentioned Ruby earlier. Like there's times at least where I've tried and had like conversations to be like, oh, I'm gonna send you a beat. And like she's always like very genuine but very busy. So it's like it's kind of one of those things, like she's at least mostly of who she is um on, you know, on stage as well as she is like in person, you know. And that's like not rare, but like you definitely see it like where there's artists who may switch it up, but like not necessarily be in a bad or you know worse place or anything. But it just, you can see that the way that they may navigate, and especially like I'm gonna just call it out as like male rappers generally are like that, you know, where they'll say one thing and then it might be like still super machismo like weird shit at the end, you know. um, but that's just like my 2 cents.
Oh no, dude, 100%. Because it's like there are a lot of I can't even think of anyone off the top of my head, but yeah, that does happen a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And even like some people like I've listened to into the past, I'm like that's the kind of energy that they're embodying and everything. Like yeah, it sucks that that's the only way like I'm seeing them, but then like looking at them at like a real perspective is like, yo, that's not really you. But then again, like when you mentioned like Ruby and everything, I don't think it's rare either, but I feel like it's also not shown as much.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's also that boundary of just like who you're letting in to see who the real you is.
For sure, for sure.
But man, that was a really good conversation, and I think like I know we've had like conversations in the past, but like this is one of those ones that like kind of it was a nice little catch up, but like we also didn't scratch. This is like barely scratching the surface of just like the stuff we talk about. Like I'm pretty sure we could go deeper, but it's like, yo, this is literally just a regular conversation, like straight up.
Definitely. I mean, like it's nice because I had all these intentions with like my projects and stuff, but I've rarely been able to speak about it. So it's kind of nice to be able to kind of like unpack on the project side, and just knowing like, you know, we could chop it up because we're community, you know. Like even though we like barely skated to like working together directly, but we still like are like the love is still there and the community is still there, you know.
Yo, that's what's up, man. And thank you for like showing a lot of love because like this conversation has been like really amazing too. And like I've been wanting to hear more about like these projects that you have up and just like everything that like you've been putting forth. And it's just like you've mentioned it in the past, but it's like actually really nice or even more nice to actually hear you like talk it out a little bit more and just elaborate on why these projects are the way they are. And it's just like, yo, I really appreciate you for getting down for today, man. It's like it's an honor to have you on here.
For sure. Thank you so much, man.
But before we end off like this little episode and everything, were there any like shout outs or any plugs that you wanted to give before we end it off?
I mean, I I didn't really think of that. I think for the most part, like for those that are listening, listen to Home, listen to Mind. I'm planning on doing more projects on like my YouTube channel, and depending on when this goes out, I'm not too sure. I'm also gonna be doing a show, the XOXO show, which is like a LGBTQ queer based like Filipinx like show that was kind of in response to the X and O a conversation for the Filipinx community. Um, but very much that's happening this Saturday. But
Is there going to be recording that? Because I think this, just looking behind the scenes, this is actually, I think this is actually coming out in November. But yeah,
oh shit,
is
my
there
bad.
going to be a recording of that somewhere?
Yeah, there'll be a recording of that. So definitely I'll send it to you, dude, and then we'll be able to like coordinate it for sure.
Yo, that'll be in the link. Make sure to check it out. But yo, dude, thanks again for showing up today. It's been an amazing episode, and thank you for giving such a an amazing vibe for today.
Yeah, dude. It's always nice to be able to like talk to folks, you know.
Heck
But
yeah, man. And that being said, yo, dude, thank you again for like this episode. Thank you all for supporting like so far. It's been a very amazing season. There's gonna be a more dope guests like Averill and like the rest of the cast that have been here on here so far. So again, thank you all for supporting thus far, and we shall catch you on the next episode. Peace out.